Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Yes, this is myself. I'm from Showtex. My name is Mandy Thomas, and besides me, I have.
Sven Peters. I'm one of the founding partners of Showtex globally, and I'm spending some time in South Africa to focus on the market here.
Yeah, and currently me and Sven are based in Cape Town, and then we've also got Liam. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Hi everyone, I'm Liam, based, like Manny said, I'm based in Johannesburg. I take care of Johannesburg and all the surrounding areas when it comes to FR and IFR fabrics for Showtex, as well as we will delve in a bit more about what we can offer the industry from a Showtex point of view. From Showtex, I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with the name Showtex. You've probably heard of us somewhere along the line, as we are based all over the globe, which gives us a fantastic opportunity to not just guide our industry, but also we've got insights from across the globe. I always joke and say, if you think of it in South Africa, Shanghai has probably done it 10 years ago already. So it is always great. We are able to tap in innovative industries across the globe, as we specialize in entertainment, live events, theater, broadcasting, yes, also exhibitions. Fabric has a space in exhibitions, and especially the architectural environments globally. Our core company develops high performance fabric systems, stage engineering solutions, and motion technologies that enable designers just think a bit more creative and push yourself out of that comfort zone. A crucial part of our focus is fire safety compliance. We specialize in certified flame retardant and inherently flame retardant fabrics that are engineered specifically for public occupancy environments. Now, these materials are developed and tested and they meet strength international safety standards. As we mentioned, we had a chat earlier with Dave and just how, it's important to take into all those considerations. We touched on spraying our drapes. We spoke about the new development of and how fabrics have developed. And that's where we want to go into today. We want to have a look and just, explore the FR environments and especially the importance of using FR and IFR fabrics at events and why it actually matters. Now, when we talk about event safety, we often focus on just the structures or the power rigging, the evacuation plan or crowd control management. But fabric exists almost everywhere in an event environment. And yet, despite how visible it is, it's often overlooked during safety planning. And it matters because fabric is everywhere. It surrounds our staging, it wraps our trusses, it forms exhibition walls, it covers ceilings, it creates scenic environments. And yet, despite everything, it is the visibility of it, we overlook it due to various reasons that we will touch on as well. And yet, the fabric defines the fire behavior, how fast it spreads, where it spreads to, our evacuation plan and so. But now, before we go further, it's important to understand the difference between FR and IFR fabrics. And I'm sure you guys have heard the terms, but when we look at FR fabrics or flame retardant fabrics, then these are chemically treated to reduce the flame spread. These fabrics require maintenance over time, so we're going to have to replace them. But because the protective properties, they are more valuable than simply just spraying your fabrics. Now, while we've got FR, we also have the IFR, which is our inherently fire retardant fabrics. Now, these are slightly different as the flame resistant is built directly into the fiber itself. So that gives us a more permanent, consistent result, and it does not wash out or diminish over time. So you do have a longer lifespan, which is ideal for a bit more of a permanent installation, such as our venues. And it's very welcoming in high-risk environments where this consistency really, really does matter. Now, to understand why flame retardant materials matter, we need to then also look at what global fire investigations consistently show us. That's quite interesting because up to 60% of fatal fire incidents involve textiles, upholsteries, or decorative materials as a key factor in fire development. Fire involving textiles are also 2 to 3 times more likely to result in fatalities than fire involving only structural materials. So things that we need to take into consideration because we overlook those textiles so often. But most importantly, in major venue fires, up to 90% of fatalities are caused not by flames themselves, but we spoke about this earlier before while we were waiting for everyone to join us. It is the toxins, the smoke that's generated while we are burning these synthetic materials. So while the ignition sources may differ from, pyrotechnicians, electrical faults, lighting fixtures, indoor effects, the materials within the environment often determine how severe the outcome of this fire would be. Now, when we look at it, we also need to look at what are the global FR standards versus South Africa, because is it really consistent? Where are we falling short? Are we really understanding the value of FR fabrics and textiles? Are we executing it correctly? And globally, flame retardant compliance is generally embedded into the event and the venue ecosystem. The standards are unified, the certification is expected, and enforcement is consistent. Now, when we look at in South Africa, the challenge is not that the standard does not exist, because they do. And we spoke about it, we touched on it earlier again, and I refer to those conversations quite a bit, because we all understand what fire can do. We all understand the safety elements to that, but the challenge is inconsistency. Now, compliance that I've noticed varies from venue to venue to event, from event, and sometimes your health and safety officer to health and safety officer. Our fabrics come with certifications, and one client would insist on receiving their certification because it's imperative for the health and safety file, while others don't even worry about it being FR. I did a school visit, and they had drapes all around the venue, and I said to the principal, well, we're going to have to replace these drapes with something FR. And he said, don't worry, our kids know how to run. So that is where we are at. We are not consistent when we implement our health and safety standards across the board. So the real problem here is not that South Africa is behind in the fire science, because like I said, we understand the risk and we understand the standards, but the real problem that we are facing in South Africa is the implementation of these. Our one venue requires, like I said, certification, supporting documents, while another just doesn't question. Now, safety should never depend on who's checking or signing off. It should be a standard expected within our industry. One of the most common responses that we hear in the industry, and it's probably Mandy, Sven, you probably hear this quite often when we're sitting, we're quoting, or we are busy with an event, we're planning, is that, but we spray our drapes. And while spraying on flame retardant may have a space and a place in certain situations, they're often misunderstood in the long term and solutions that they offer, because there are so many factors that we need to take into consideration when we're looking at spraying our drapes. Now, spray treatments are inexpensive and widely available, and that's why we use them, because they commonly used everywhere. And their effectiveness depends heavily on the type of fabric you're going to be using, your application method, the environmental exposure, the maintenance and time that it takes. If we think of spray, we need to also consider that on heavier fabrics, and on loose waves. So now that's your pleating within your drape that you're going to be having your fullness, to having a flat drape or 100%, 50% fullness. That also contributes to the longevity and the maintenance of this, and the effectiveness rather, of the spray solution. It depends on if you're using a velour or a vertically hung drape. Now, on a vertically hung drape, the treatment can migrate downwards and pull unevenly and leave inconsistent protection zones. So if your drape is pleated, behind that pleat, you're not going to get protection.
Yeah,
And
the
that means
problem
that
with the synthetic fibers also is, sorry to interrupt, Liam, is that some of these fibers don't. So what happens is that a curtain that's 10 meters tall, for example, they will spray it, but the solution will slowly sag to the bottom of the drape. You maybe test the drape with a cut-off piece from the bottom where there's a serious buildup of all the spray treatment. So there it will be flame retardant, but on the top where it really matters, it will not be flame retardant at all. And that's the danger. So it gives a really misconception of safety, or misfeeling of safety.
That's very true. Because my next point is the different fabrics and how it absorbs it differently. And my example here is the polyester fabrics that resist absorption, and that then drips down. So while cotton, on the other hand, may heavily absorb the spray again, which you also do not want. So, layered fabrics can create untreated hidden areas. So even when the same spray is applied, the fire performance can vary dramatically depending on the material itself, like Sven said. So that inconsistency becomes a major safety concern. One of the biggest technical concerns with spray treatments is what happens on polyester fabrics, like we just mentioned. And in many cases, the liquid treatment migrates then down and you're left exposed because all your lighting, all that equipment that you've installed is at the bottom. So you're leaving that entire area as a high risk area, because all your protection is now it's migrated to the bottom of that fabric. Whilst when we look at our Showtex products rather, this is where the difference between a treated fabric and an engineered fire retardant fabric becomes critically important. With certified FR and IFR fabrics, the flame retardant performance is part of the material system itself, not simply something applied onto the surface after manufacturing. That distinction matters because consistency matters when we are dealing with fires. In public environments, we can't really rely on assumptions and assuming that it is covered behind because it's sprayed, covered. We have to take into all those little factors that come to play. We have to take that into consideration. We cannot rely on whether enough spray was enough applied or who applied the spray and was it absorbed. When we're dealing with fires, we can't be uncertain. We can't rely on human error. While engineered FR and IFR fabrics are designed specifically for environments where large numbers of people gather. And this is our events, exhibitions, theater, you guys know, in all public venues. Now, these materials are tested against recognized fire standards across the globe and are designed to provide predictable fire behavior, reduced flame spread, reduced escalation risk, and more reliable evacuation time during an emergency. Now, we have gone to one of our big trusted venues. They host majority of our large-scale events, and we did some tests. And I would like to show you this test that we conducted. So, Mandy, on the first, if you just help me here, the first one I think was one of the leading venues. The second one was a school. And then we look at our Showtex product. And these are environments and fabrics that were sprayed. And they were certified. This is where we're sending our delegates.
We took that sample from an event that was happening where a large delegation of people were in the room, and the fabric was hanging all the way around.
It's spray-on fabric,
Yeah,
apparently.
and that was, so to speak, sprayed and tested. And you see that's the one on the left, and it's just scary.
So the question becomes, if South Africa has recognized standards, why does compliance still vary so dramatically from venue or event to the next person signing it off? Because in many cases, the issue is not awareness, it's decision making. That's where our problem comes in.
And sometimes they make the decision from a budget point of view, even knowing the risk.
And these case studies did just this. And that's why I want to look at some case studies. This was Tomorrowland, a stage fire. And the ignition starts with fire, but consumable materials determine how far they spread. And as you can see in this video, it spreads quite quickly. And around the world, we continue to see incidents where decorative materials accelerate fire growth dramatically. In this, it was signed off, it was treated, and yet because our stages are consumed by textiles, this was the result. And we can look at further case studies. These incidents had all different ignition sources. It was pyrotechnics, it was indoor effects, it was electrical failures. But the most common factor here was consumable interior materials that accelerated the fire development and smoke production. In many of these tragedies, fatalities were caused less by the initial ignition and more by the spread of fire and toxic smoke, because we have to take that into consideration as well. And yes, I'm showing you guys all international case studies, and these are not local case studies, but must we really wait to become a global case study statistic before we take charge in our event space, before we start implementing more regular and consistent sign-off when it comes to FR and IFR certifications? Because what we're doing is we're just failing in compliance. And when we fail in compliance, right, we're talking a lot more than just, it goes beyond the property damage. There are injuries, there's legal exposure, there's insurance disputes, there's venue shutdowns, and there's reputational damage. And in worst case scenarios, the loss of life. The same delegates that we rely on to attend our events. Now, we have a responsibility to our attendees who attend our events. They could have chosen to attend any other event, but they chose to attend your event. Now, we clearly do have a responsibility towards them to keep them safe. That's inhalation, smoke inhalation, evacuation plans, all determined. Hang on this little factor when we now fail to comply.
Excuse me, Liam, you've got a question here. How compliant is South Africa compared to the world? I think if you go back in one of your slides, it does speak about the SANS.
Yes. So we are very compliant. We've had incidences, and because of those incidences, we have great standards set in place. But the problem that we have is when we look at different venues, and let me just name a couple. For example, if I go to the Sunbed Arena, they insist on stringent certification to be produced before we even take those fabrics in. Before we are allowed to hang a drape, they want their certificates. While we go to other venues, which we will be attending one great event coming up next month with them, but they simply don't care. They just page through your certificates. It's really, and this is where the disconnect comes in, because we do have those stringent standards in place. In many cases,
they're not enforced. They're not enforced.
It's just not enforced. And because it's not enforced, we don't care for it when it comes to the budget. So that is where it comes in. It's, and in the planning phase. And as Sven mentioned, this is why it's easy for us to then overlook it in the budgets, and we overlook it because no one looks at it. It's convenient. It became a habit to not implement and request those specific certifications.
We know that, for example, there's some people wrap their truss with the fabric. It's called gabardine, I think they call it, and the trusses are full of lighting. They're full of cables. There's risks of short circuits in the cables, and nobody says. Everybody will say like, "Oh, that never happens," but it does happen. And then if your truss is wrapped with that burning fabric, yeah, then it starts to spread very quickly, and it's high up in the air. Your fire extinguishers will not reach that standing on the floor. So the risks are huge, and we see this on a weekly basis being done in South Africa.
Yeah, and especially like you mentioned, wrapping a truss with that, fire spread. By the time you get to your fire extinguisher, it's pointless. Your evacuation plan is now affected because it is the speed of the fabric and how it burns, where the FR fabrics smolder rather than accelerate. But we look at, and it's also using the gabardine like Sven's mentioned on a truss instead of a proper truss sleeve that has been treated, is budget related, because that's where we're going to be cutting our budgets. We actually had a joke yesterday when we went through our presentation, is that budget that you've saved, that 20K that you saved, how many funeral policies can you pay with that? So you saved, but did you essentially save anything? You didn't. And the responsibility still comes up to us. It comes to our designers when we start designing it. Reach out to Showtex, reach out and find out how we can implement those fabrics. We've got a large range from scrims, projection screen surfaces. We have a range and a product that will possibly not just enhance your experience, but also keep it in a safe way. It's our event planners, where we're sitting with our budgets while we're planning our events. We're to bring this in and highlight it as a priority. Our venues, we cannot have our venues take shortcuts and spray our fabrics twice a year. When we have events every weekend, every week, we need to be a bit more on top of that. And it comes down to our suppliers to also just be realistic and say, you know what, this is at the end of the day, safety is a shared responsibility. It doesn't just come down to the health and safety person or the design. It comes down to everyone at the end of the day. Because when we look at it, material choices is not just the visual and an elevation. It's a safety decision. If fabric is going to be part of an environment, whether temporary or permanent, the flame retardant compliance must be considered from the beginning, during budget, during planning, during procurement, and during final sign-off. Because at the end of the day, it's not just visual, it is crucial for our event industry. And that, ladies and gentlemen, brings me at the end of our presentation. And I do thank you guys for your time and for allowing Showtex to be part of your webinar this morning. And then we would open it up to any questions and answers, while we do have Sven, very, very educated and has a fantastic background. So if you have any questions, now is the time to dig into that side.
Now, I think it's very important and something that is overlooked quite often. And I think it's a subject that actually needs to be brought to the forefront a bit more. I'm quite happy to actually run maybe an article in the magazine just to get people like realizing that there's something that they might be missing. And when these accidents happen at these shows and that people, then they go, oh, we should have like done something about it. But I think it was really insightful. Thank you so much, Liam. I really enjoyed the webinar. But I would love it if you could write me something for the mag. But I'll take it off. I'll send you an email. I'll get Hanli to send me your email address.
I can add something from my point of view. Like we've been in the country for 15 years already, Showtex, and we're surviving, but we're not doing the same as we do across the planet. So I'm wondering what's the issue, what's the struggle, and we don't want to give up. We believe in this country. We want to be here. Showtex wants to be selling products here. And I started to dig last year a bit more. And how does it come? We can't sell this. And we went to a couple of venues and we did some tests and inspections, and it was really scary. I was, of course, I'm talking from a commercial point of view. Don't get me wrong, but it was scary to see how unsecure and unsafe the sites were and the venues. And one event was for DHL, I think, and there was CEOs from all over the planet attending a global summit, and they were sitting in a fireball, and it was scary. I could not believe it. I've never seen this anywhere else in the world.
I'm so glad you mentioned the comparison between the countries, Sven, because that then also just goes and assists the question we had previously as to where the standard is in South Africa versus globally. You know, when we look at Showtex globally, we are at every event, we are a must-have, but in South Africa, Showtex is an option. And that gives you an indication as to where our standard implementations across the board actually is at.
And I'm open for competition. Even doesn't have to be Showtex, but the fact that there was so much fabric and nobody cared about it.
And lights were right against it, and the wires are lying on top of it.
We also had the discussion the other day where, about that specifically. Remember, I told you about the stand that caught fire at a show that I had. And it's that kind of thing. People don't realize that the lights are so hot against that fabric that, it's easy for a to start there. I see Doug has asked if this presentation will be shared as for future reference. Yes, it will become a resource for EXSA. Showtex is also going to the Event Safety Summit in July, and obviously, some people will then be seeing this presentation. So we are not going to share it before the Event Safety Summit has taken place, but I think one or two people, you won't mind, Mandy, Liam, if I share it with one or two people.
Oh, that's completely fine. Yeah.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the team or any comments? Dave, you had a lot to say before the webinar. Maybe you've got some questions now or some comments.
I just find the whole fire aspect of things so important. I don't think anybody can understand what it's like to be in a fire. It's terrible, terrible.
If we're taking into consideration the fact that if we just simply spray us, like I said, it's not necessarily the fire that's going to get, it is the burning of those toxins that you inhale on your way out on this evacuation plan. That is also a cause of damage. So we need to take those things into not just consideration, but we have to value the importance of this and rather not wait until the end or for an incident to happen. It is a South African mentality that we wait and then implement. But in cases like this, and if we can change the way our industry perceives health and safety and how we implement this across the board, we will avoid being a statistic. And I think that is the importance that this presentation just needs to get across. Like Sven said, we're open to some competition. That'll be fantastic, but we need to have it as a standard across the board in our industry.
I don't specifically do a lot of work in the exhibition world, as in, traditional trade shows at convention centers. A lot of my current work is either in a corporate head office or in a shopping center, or frankly, in a car park. What is your take on, so that being said, we don't have safety officers, or put it this way, every conceivable rule like a COC and all of that is just completely forgotten. So I have seen some horrendous setups which we part of, but they're not my client, where COC, fire, safety, all of that is just out the door. Because nobody's watching, it's not a traditional electromining that somebody's on duty.
And that was part of our presentation, is just the inconsistency and highlighting the inconsistency across the event sector, that, and certain spaces, we just quickly overlook it because it's going to be a 3-hour activation. It's a morning event. So no one really needs to sign off on the structure or any of that. And that is our cry to the industry, is to rather, implement more stringent implementations across the board.
The minute you are an organizer and you invite people, you need to take all safety standards in consideration, because you're responsible. And if something happens, the insurance will come to the organizer, they will not speak to the victims, they will speak to the organizer.
The mentality where we're at is, as organizers, as the event person, as the supplier, we now want to take that onto ourselves and have a little kit prepared. But when because of budget or decision or design, we now want to carry that on ourselves. But when we just implement and use the correct IFR and FR products, we would not have to ask or expect it from ourselves to carry that with us. I think if we plan and we design from implementation, we plan and design a strategy with health and safety in mind, then that should answer all those open-ended questions of, and like we said earlier, you get to one event, they ask you for 500 health and safety requirements, your file is as thick as the next, and then you get to the other one where you simply just walk in with no tag, no certification, you do your thing, you pop out, and you leave that behind, for the next person to burn out with.
I want to share an experience. We have opened an office in Tokyo also 2 years ago. In Japan, the standard is that every drape we make has to have a small pocket with a piece of fabric from the drape that's made, so the fire brigade can test at any time that curtain, and that curtain will get its own label that it's fire safe. Every single curtain.
Brian, I think in a nutshell, what Liam and Sven is saying, prevention is better than cure.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully our presence at the safety summit later on would spark this conversation on a large scale. We've got high-end delegates attending, and so hopefully we could reach through to our safety officers and make a difference within the industry. I think that is first and foremost the push that from Showtex's side.
I think that was it. Team Showtex, thank you very much. Certainly, like Dave said this morning,
and a pleasure.
Thank you.
It's a discussion that can continue for a little bit longer, because there's a lot of questions and a lot of scenarios that people would like to raise. But at this point, I think we will call it a day for now, and we'll, obviously connect with you again. Irene from her side with the article, and for the event safety summit, that everyone can just have a look there as well, and listen to what you say. And I've made some notes that I'll share with Kevin, and obviously that can also filter through to your presentation. But thank you so much for your time, everyone. Thanks for attending, and we look forward to engaging again in the near future.
Awesome. Thank you very much for the opportunity.